She stood in the courtroom, eyes trembling but chin high, as if the world owed her belief. "I didn't do it," she swore, her voice soft yet defiant. For a moment, even the jury hesitated. Her tone carried conviction, the kind that could almost make lies sound like truth. But as the judge glanced toward the screen behind her, a single phrase echoed through the silent hall. "Roll the footage." What followed would shatter her facade in seconds. Hey, before we dive into what really happened in that courtroom, take a second to hit subscribe. It helps more people see these real stories of truth and justice. Now back to her story. The moment the video began playing, her confidence started to crumble. There she was, the same orange jumpsuit, the same face, but a very different tone. The clip showed her laughing, joking, and saying things no innocent person would ever say after what she claimed was self-defense. The jury's eyes widened. The prosecutor didn't have to say a word. The evidence spoke louder than any argument. Every smirk she once flashed during testimony now looked cruel, manipulative. Even her own lawyer leaned back, defeated, knowing the game was over. She tried to whisper something to him, maybe a new excuse, maybe a plea, but he didn't look back. The footage ran on, showing moments that left no doubt about her intentions that night. In the still air of that courtroom, her tears finally came, not as a weapon, but as surrender. And when the judge finally spoke, his voice was calm, almost sorrowful. "You swore to this court you were innocent, but truth doesn't need a promise. It just needs time." The room remained silent. Not a soul moved. For the first time, she realized, truth always finds a voice, even when you try to bury it. The courtroom felt colder now. The video still played in the background, frame by frame, tearing down everything she'd claimed. The prosecutor stepped forward, his tone calm but cutting. "You swore under oath that you never touched him," he said. "Would you like to explain what we're seeing here?" Her lips parted, but no sound came out. The jury didn't blink. Their eyes flicked between the screen and her face, the face of someone who had just been caught by her own lies. The defense attorney rose, trying to object, but even his voice shook. "Your Honor, this footage was provided by your client's own phone," the prosecutor interrupted. Gasps spread through the courtroom like a wave. The judge leaned back, fingers steepled, studying her. "Miss Cole, you said you had nothing to hide," he said quietly. "But the truth doesn't seem to share your confidence." She lowered her head, her hand trembling as she tried to wipe away tears that wouldn't come. For the first time, the charm that had once swayed everyone around her was gone. What remained was fear, raw, undeniable fear. The video ended. The screen went dark. The silence that followed was worse than any sound. Everyone waited for her next move. But there was none, because deep down, she knew the truth had already spoken louder than she ever could. The defense attorney stood, his suit wrinkled, his voice trembling. "Your Honor, my client was under emotional distress that night. The footage doesn't capture her fear, it only captures a moment." The prosecutor turned sharply. "A moment?" That moment lasted 12 minutes. The jury stirred. The judge raised a hand. "Proceed," she said. The defense attorney looked back at her, desperate. "You don't understand." She thought she was defending herself. The prosecutor crossed her arms. "Then why was she smiling in the video?" Silence again. The woman's eyes filled with tears. "Because I didn't think it would go that far," she whispered. "I just wanted him to stop yelling." The judge leaned forward. "So you struck him first?" The woman froze. The room waited. Her voice came out small. "Yes." The judge's expression didn't change, but something in the air did. The audience murmured softly. The prosecutor walked back to the evidence table, closing her folder. No further questions. The defense attorney sighed deeply, knowing the case had slipped through his fingers. For the first time, the jury saw her not as a victim, but as a person cornered by her own choices. And in that moment, she understood something she hadn't before. When truth finally shows up, it doesn't knock, it breaks the door down. Judge Harris leaned forward, her eyes sharp but steady. "Let's revisit that night," she said. "From the beginning." The courtroom lights felt harsher now, each flicker bouncing off the polished wooden panels as if to highlight every lie that had been told in this room. The defendant swallowed hard, her throat dry. "He came home angry," she began, her voice trembling. "He was shouting, throwing things. I was scared." The prosecutor didn't interrupt, just watched, waiting. And then? Judge Harris asked. Then he came closer, she whispered. I panicked. You panicked, the judge repeated slowly. And yet you retrieved a weapon from the kitchen, didn't you? The woman hesitated. Yes, but? The prosecutor stepped in, holding up a printed still frame from the footage. This was taken 30 seconds before the first strike. You weren't cornered. Miss Cole, you were advancing. The courtroom gasped softly. The defendant's eyes widened. That's not what it looks like. No, the prosecutor said evenly. It's exactly what it looks like, the judge's voice dropped to a near whisper. Miss Cole, did you ever try to leave the house? The woman blinked rapidly, searching for words. I thought, if I ran, he'd follow. So you stayed, and attacked instead. Silence. The tension in the room was unbearable. A juror shifted in his seat. The defendant finally muttered, I didn't mean to hurt him. The judge nodded slowly. But you did. And after that? The prosecutor opened another file. After that, she made a phone call. Not to the police, she paused, letting the silence stretch. To her friend. Asking for help hiding the body. The gallery gasped again, a low wave of shock. The woman shook her head violently. No! That's not true, she misunderstood. The prosecutor smiled faintly. We'll see what your friend says when she takes the stand. Tomorrow, the judge tapped, her pen lightly. Court adjourned for today. The gavel struck once, echoing like thunder. The woman slumped in her chair, her breath shallow. The mask of innocence she had worn so tightly was beginning to tear, and everyone in that courtroom could see what lay beneath. The next morning, the courtroom filled with quiet anticipation. Reporters whispered, cameras clicked, and the woman sat rigid in her orange jumpsuit, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Judge Harris entered, her robe flowing like a shadow across the bench. Call your next witness, she ordered. The prosecutor stood. The state calls Laura Jensen. A murmur ran through the room. The woman's eyes widened. Laura was her best friend, the one she had called that night. Laura walked in hesitantly, avoiding her gaze. She looked nervous but resolute. After being sworn in, the prosecutor began softly. Ms. Jensen, can you tell the court about the phone call you received from the defendant on the night of March 12th? Laura's fingers twisted around the edge of the witness stand. She sounded calm, she said slowly. Not scared. Calm, like she had already made up her mind. The defendant's mouth dropped open. That's not true, she blurted out. The judge slammed her gavel once. You will remain silent. The prosecutor nodded to Laura to continue. She said she needed help. I asked if I should call the police. She told me no. She said, he's gone, and it's better that way. Gasps filled the room. The defendant shook her head violently, tears streaming down her cheeks. Laura, please, you're twisting my words. Laura looked at her, pain in her eyes. I'm not, she whispered. You told me you couldn't let him ruin you. The prosecutor approached. Ms. Jensen, did she ask you to remove anything from her house? Laura nodded slowly. Yes, she asked me to delete messages and take the knife. The courtroom erupted. Reporters scribbled furiously, and the judge called for order. The defendant's attorney buried his face in his hands. Your Honor, the witness is mistaken. She's clearly traumatized. No, the judge replied firmly. She's consistent, and that's what truth sounds like. The woman's cries filled the courtroom, her words breaking into sobs, but it was too late. The sound of the truth had already drowned out every lie she'd ever told. The defense wasted no time. As soon as Laura stepped down from the witness stand, the attorney rose quickly, buttoning his jacket with shaking hands. Your Honor, he began. The defense would like to recall the witness for cross-examination. The judge gave a small nod. Proceed. Laura returned, visibly uneasy. The attorney smiled faintly. Ms. Jensen? You've testified that my client called you on March 12th, correct? Yes, Laura replied. And you claim she asked you to delete messages and remove a weapon from her home? Laura nodded again. Yes. The attorney leaned in slightly. Tell me, Ms. Jensen, did you record this call? Did you save those messages? No, she admitted. So you're relying purely on memory from a night when you claim you were shocked and scared? Laura hesitated. Yes, but I remember what she said. The defense attorney turned to the jury. And yet you have no proof. No phone records, no audio. No evidence, he smiled. Ladies and gentlemen, this entire accusation rests on emotion, not fact, the jury murmured softly. The defendant lifted her head slightly, hope flickering in her eyes. But then, the prosecutor stood. Your Honor, she said calmly, the state would like to submit supplemental evidence. She held up a small USB drive. The courtroom froze. What is that? The defense asked sharply. The prosecutor smiled faintly. It's a backup from the witness's phone, automatically saved to the cloud. We recovered the deleted data this morning. Gasps echoed through the room. The judge gestured. Proceed. The prosecutor clicked play. A tinny audio filled the room, Laura's voice trembling. Should I call the police? Then the defendant's voice, cold and deliberate. No, just get rid of it. The silence that followed was suffocating. The defense attorney sank into his chair, the woman's face drained of all color. Her voice cracked as she whispered, That wasn't supposed to exist. The judge leaned forward, her tone low but cutting. The truth always exists, Ms. Cole. You just tried to erase it. The courtroom was eerily quiet. The sound of her own voice still echoed faintly in the air. Just get rid of it. She sat frozen, staring at the screen as if the words had come from someone else. Her attorney leaned closer, whispering frantically, Don't say anything. Let me handle this. But the damage was already done. The jury's eyes were no longer curious. They were certain. Judge Harris tapped her pen slowly against the bench. Ms. Cole, she said softly, the court has been patient. But your silence speaks volumes. Do you have anything to say before we continue? For the first time since the trial began, the woman looked up. Her mascara was smudged, her voice unsteady. I was scared, she whispered. He said things no one should say. Then why didn't you call the police? The judge asked. Because, she hesitated, tears spilling down her cheeks, because no one ever believed me before. The room fell silent. Again, not out of sympathy, but confusion. The prosecutor frowned. So you decided to make sure they would this time, no matter what it took? The woman nodded faintly. I wanted control. For once in my life, the judge leaned forward. Control isn't justice. Ms. Cole, it's vengeance dressed as reason. The prosecutor approached the bench, placing a small folder down. Your Honor, the state has additional excerpts, from her text messages leading up to the event. The defense groaned. Objection. These were not included in discovery. They were, the prosecutor interrupted. You just didn't recognize the sender. She handed over the pages. The judge's brow furrowed as she read. These messages are to someone named Ryan? The defendant's breath caught. No, please, it appears, the prosecutor said evenly, that Ms. Cole had been planning to confront the victim for weeks. She wrote, and I quote, If I can't prove he's guilty, I'll make him look that way. Gasps filled the courtroom. The judge looked down, disappointed rather than angry. We'll adjourn for today, she said quietly. Tomorrow, we'll discuss the full timeline of events. As the gavel fell, the woman buried her face in her hands. The mask of fear was gone now. What remained was something darker, remorse mixed with the weight of knowing. The truth was only just beginning to surface. The next morning began under gray skies, the kind that made the courthouse look colder than usual. Reporters lined up outside, waiting for something new to break, some twist that would push the story even deeper into chaos. Inside, the air was tense, almost brittle. The defendant sat quietly, her eyes distant, as if trapped somewhere far from the wood-paneled walls around her. The bailiff called the court to order, and Judge Harris entered with that same calm power that made even the loudest room go silent. We'll continue where we left off, she said. The prosecution may proceed. The prosecutor stood, holding a small folder. Before we move forward, Your Honor, the state requests permission to introduce background evidence related to motive. The defense objected instantly. Irrelevant and prejudicial. The judge shook her head. Overruled. Let's hear it. The prosecutor opened the folder and held up a photo, an image of the defendant from 5 years earlier. This, she said, is not the first time. Ms. Cole has made similar accusations. The courtroom buzzed. 5 years ago, she filed a complaint against another man. Same pattern. Same story, different outcome. That case was dismissed for lack of evidence. The judge looked to the defendant. Is that true? The woman nodded slowly, her voice breaking. Yes. But that was different. Different how? The prosecutor asked gently. Because, she whispered, that time, I was really the victim. The words hung heavy in the room. The prosecutor paused, measuring her response. And after that? The defendant took a shaky breath. After that, no one believed me anymore. Every time I said something happened, they just looked at me like I was lying. The judge's expression softened, but her tone remained firm. Pain doesn't justify deceit. Ms. Cole, if you wanted the truth to be heard, you should have spoken it, not built it. The woman's shoulders slumped. You don't understand, she said quietly. I thought if I could make them see how it felt, maybe they'd finally believe me. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The prosecutor closed the folder. Your Honor, the state rests for now. Judge Harris nodded. Court will reconvene tomorrow. And Ms. Cole, she added, the past may explain your choices, but it will not excuse them. The gavel fell hard, and as everyone rose to leave, the woman sat still, haunted by the sound of truth catching up to her again. The following day, the courtroom lights flickered as the trial resumed. The air felt heavier, tension mixed with exhaustion. The defendant sat quietly, her hands cuffed, her eyes hollow. She had spent the night in a holding cell, replaying every lie, every excuse. Every I didn't mean to, but today, the truth wasn't waiting for her confession. It was coming for her. The prosecutor stood, her voice calm and sharp. Ms. Cole, yesterday you admitted to fabricating parts of your story. I'd like you to explain why. The woman took a shaky breath. Because no one ever listened when I told the truth, she said. When I was 19, I called for help. And they laughed at me. The courtroom went still. The judge leaned forward slightly. Who laughed at you? The officers, she whispered. They told me to go home. Said I was overreacting. After that, I promised myself I'd never be powerless. Again, the prosecutor's tone softened. So you decided to make people listen. Even if it meant creating a lie. Tears rolled down her face. I just wanted control, she murmured. For once, I wanted to be believed. Belief, Judge Harris said quietly, is earned through truth, not force. The defense attorney rose. Your Honor, my client's trauma clearly influenced her judgment. The judge cut in. Trauma explains, Counselor. It does not erase accountability. The prosecutor approached the witness stand, placing a single photograph on the table. Ms. Cole, do you recognize this? The woman nodded weakly. It's me. Before everything. The image showed her smiling with the man she claimed to fear. He wasn't perfect, she said softly. But he didn't deserve this, her voice cracked. None of it was supposed to happen. The judge sighed, her tone both stern and sorrowful. You had a chance to heal through truth, but you chose manipulation instead. That is what destroys justice. As the courtroom emptied, she sat alone at the defense table. For the first time, she didn't cry for pity. She cried because she finally understood what she had done. The courtroom was filled with the soft hum of whispers as the prosecutor prepared her final exhibit. The large screen flickered to life, displaying a timeline, minute by minute, hour by hour, showing exactly how the night of the incident unfolded. Judge Harris gestured for silence. Proceed, she said. The prosecutor stepped forward. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we've heard excuses, we've heard tears, and we've seen guilt denied. But now we'll see the truth, exactly as it happened. The lights dimmed, and the footage began. It showed the woman leaving her apartment at 8:47 p.m. Her pace was steady, not fearful, not hurried. At 9:10, she arrived at the victim's home. Notice, the prosecutor said. She's carrying something under her coat. The defense rose. Objection. Speculation? Overruled, Judge Harris said without hesitation. The footage zoomed in, revealing the outline of a knife handle. The jury leaned forward. At 9:16, the prosecutor continued. You'll see the first altercation. The victim moves back. He doesn't advance. He's unarmed. The defendant's eyes filled with tears. Please stop, she whispered. The prosecutor ignored her. At 9:19, she makes a phone call, not to emergency services, but to her friend Laura. The courtroom gasped softly. The judge turned to the defendant. Is this accurate? Yes, she whispered. But I didn't mean for it to happen. You meant every step you took that night, the judge replied coldly. Intent isn't always spoken, it's acted. The footage paused at the final frame, the woman kneeling beside the victim, phone still in hand. This, the prosecutor said, isn't self-defense. It's premeditation. The jury sat in stunned silence. The judge folded her hands. We'll recess until tomorrow for closing statements. The gavel struck once, but the echo lingered. For the first time, the woman understood. Justice had been patient, but it had never stopped watching. The jury room was silent except for the faint ticking of the wall clock. 12 strangers sat around a long table, each face carrying the weight of someone else's life. Files were spread open, photographs stacked, and the video still looping on the laptop at the end of the table. She planned it, one juror said firmly, tapping the table. You heard the messages. Another shook her head. But what if she really was scared that night? What if she snapped? The foreman sighed. Fear doesn't erase intent. You don't hide evidence when you're innocent. A younger juror, barely out of college, spoke quietly. She didn't seem evil, just broken. The room went quiet. Broken wasn't a legal term, but it was true. Hours passed. Arguments rose and fell. The evidence was clear, yet no one wanted to say the words out loud. Finally, the foreman stood. Let's take one last vote. Hands went up one after another, until all 12 were raised. Guilty. The room felt heavier now, as if the decision itself carried a heartbeat. We didn't have a choice, one whispered. We just followed the truth. When they returned to the courtroom, the defendant wouldn't look up. She could feel their eyes on her before they even spoke. Judge Harris asked, Has the jury reached a verdict? The foreman nodded. We have, Your Honor. Please, read it. The foreman unfolded the paper with trembling hands. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty on all counts. A sharp gasp escaped the gallery, and the woman's face went pale. The words struck harder than she'd imagined. The judge's voice was calm but final. Justice has spoken. As the gavel fell, the woman's last tear slipped quietly onto the wooden table. For the first time, she didn't deny it. The truth had won. The gavel's echo faded, but the weight of the verdict remained, suspended in the air like smoke that refused to clear. Judge Harris glanced toward the defendant, her voice steady. Ms. Cole, before sentencing, the court will allow you to make a final statement. The woman didn't move at first. Her lawyer whispered something, but she barely heard him. Finally, she stood. The chains around her wrists clinked softly, echoing louder than her voice when she began to speak. I used to think truth was just a story, something you could shape if you said it with enough confidence, she said, her tone quiet but trembling. I told myself I was protecting my dignity, but I was just protecting my lies. She paused, looking toward the jury, the same faces that had spent hours deciding her fate. You were right, she said softly. I planned it. I wanted him to feel powerless like I once did, but I didn't think it would go this far. Her lawyer tugged gently at her sleeve, but she shook her head. Let me finish, she turned to the judge. I've been angry for so long I forgot what it felt like to be honest. So here it is. I did it. I caused it, and I'll live with it. The room was still. The kind of silence that wasn't judgment, it was sorrow. Judge Harris leaned back, her expression unreadable. The truth has a way of arriving late, she said. But it always arrives, she sighed softly. You've shown remorse, Ms. Cole, but remorse does not erase consequence. The judge lifted her notes. You are hereby sentenced to 20 years in state prison. The sound of the gavel was final this time. No hesitation, no appeal, no escape. As the bailiff approached, the woman didn't cry. Instead, she looked up at the judge and whispered, Thank you for letting me tell the truth. And for the first time, since the trial began, her voice didn't tremble. It was steady. It was real. The prison gates closed behind her with a metallic echo that sounded almost ceremonial. For the first time in months, there were no reporters, no flashing lights, no whispers of judgment, just silence, the kind that forced you to face yourself. She walked down the long corridor of gray concrete and iron bars, guided by a guard who didn't speak. The orange jumpsuit felt heavier now, but not because of the fabric, because of what it meant. She wasn't pretending anymore. In her cell, she sat on the narrow bed and stared at the small window near the ceiling. A thin ray of sunlight cut through the dust, falling across her hands. She traced its edge with her finger and whispered, "I guess this is what truth feels like." Days turned into weeks. She kept to herself, reading old books from the prison library and writing letters she never sent. Letters to the people she hurt. Letters to the person she used to be. One afternoon, she was assigned to clean the visitation room. As she wiped down the tables, a familiar voice stopped her in her tracks. "Rebecca." She turned. It was Laura, the friend who had testified against her. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Laura said quietly, "I didn't come to hurt you. I just needed to know." "Do you hate me?" Rebecca looked down, her eyes soft but tired. "No," she said. "You were the only one brave enough to tell the truth when I couldn't." Laura's eyes welled up. "I wish it didn't end like this." Rebecca smiled faintly. "It's okay. Maybe this is how it was supposed to end. For me to finally stop lying." The guard cleared his throat. "Time's up." Laura hesitated, then whispered, "Take care of yourself." Rebecca nodded. "You too." When the door closed, Rebecca sat back down and breathed deeply. For the first time, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt honest. Weeks passed, and the rhythm of prison life became almost predictable. Morning roll call, work duty, silence. But every night, when the cell block dimmed and the world outside faded into a memory, Rebecca would write. She filled notebook after notebook with stories, not excuses, not defenses, but confessions. Each page began the same way, to whoever still believes in redemption. She wrote about the first time she lied, the thrill of control, the fear that followed. She wrote about the man she hurt, how she wished she could tell his family that she wasn't a monster, just lost. One day, during mail inspection, a guard paused at her cell. "You're writing a lot these days," he said. Rebecca smiled faintly. "It's the only thing that keeps me honest." He grunted. "Who are you writing to?" "No one," she replied softly. "Maybe everyone." But one of those notebooks didn't stay in her cell. During a routine inspection, a counselor found it, skimmed a few pages, and brought it to the warden. A week later, Rebecca was called into an office she hadn't seen before. Clean walls, a wooden desk, and sunlight streaming through a barred window. "Your writing," the counselor said. "It's powerful." The rehabilitation board read it. "They think it could help others." Rebecca frowned. "Help? How?" "We'd like to publish it," the counselor said gently. "With your permission. It could become part of an outreach program for at-risk youth." She stared, stunned. "You want to use my lies to teach the truth?" "No," he said with a small smile. "We want to use your truth to stop new lies before they start." For the first time in years, Rebecca felt something unfamiliar, hope. She nodded slowly. "If my story can stop even one person from becoming me," she said, "then maybe. All of this means something." As she walked back to her cell, she didn't feel like an inmate anymore. She felt like someone rebuilding, one truth at a time. Years later, the courtroom looked different. New paint, brighter lights. But Rebecca still felt the same chill as she stepped inside. Only this time there were no handcuffs, no guards walking behind her. Instead, she held a stack of worn notebooks under her arm. The nameplate on the bench read, "Judge Eleanor Price." Rebecca smiled faintly. The same judge who had sentenced her was still there. The room filled with teenagers, students from a rehabilitation program. Judge Price began. "Today's guest speaker knows what it means to face consequences and rebuild from them. Please welcome Rebecca Cole." The murmurs quieted. Rebecca took a deep breath and stepped forward. "I once stood where many of you might be heading," she said. "I thought I could outsmart the truth. But the truth is patient. It always wins." The room was silent except for the soft rustle of notebook pages. "I don't want to scare you," she continued, her tone calm but firm. "I just want you to understand that every lie you tell builds a wall between who you are and who you could be. I built mine so high I almost never climbed out." A boy in the back raised his hand. "Do you forgive yourself?" Rebecca paused. "Every day," she said softly. "But forgiveness isn't a switch. It's a habit. You earn it by doing one honest thing after another." Judge Price nodded approvingly. When the session ended, Rebecca gathered her notes. As she turned to leave, the judge called her name. "Ms. Cole," she said, her voice warm now. You've turned your sentence into a lesson. I'm proud of that. Rebecca smiled, tears in her eyes. Thank you, Your Honor. I think I finally understand what justice really means. Outside the courthouse, she looked up at the sky, open, wide, and endless. For the first time in her life, the truth didn't hurt. It set her free.